Hello, everybody. Welcome to Reserve Seating. We are beginning Rob month in style with the Sight and Sound list. So, Rob, why don't you tell everybody about the theme for the month and what movie we're talking about first this week?
I my goal was to record the lowest rated reserve seating series of all time. So we're talking about Bertolucci's The Conformist today because I gave myself the task of watching through the Sight and Sound 250, which is actually the Sight and Sound like 263 or something like that because
Mm.
of ties or whatever. But there's a bunch of movies in there I've never seen before, and so I decided I wanted to watch them in 2025. And I decided that for Rob Month, we would take some time to do it together because it's more
Yeah.
fun when you do things with friends. When you watch really brutal Italian movies about fascism with your friends, it's much better than watching them on your own.
This is gonna be a weird comparison, but this felt like if you watched like too many, like one too many serial killer movies,
Yeah.
and like there's that one that you watch where you're just like, am I like depraved? Should I watch something like more wholesome? Like, why am I doing this to myself? To be fair, and obviously it's on the Sight and Sound list, so it's very well respected, if not liked. I will say this, I was watching the movie on DVD. It broke my TV.
It did.
So it took my TV's sight and sound. There we go. Thank you, Rob.
This is why we do this. So you can say brilliant shit like that.
And I was pretty grumpy watching the rest of the movie on my phone off of YouTube, which to YouTube's credit, it was a 99-cent rental. So thank you, YouTube. The movie unto itself, I will say, other than the big takeaway for me is just like what a creepy feeling it was watching this movie. I think obviously in light of current events, it's probably not the right movie to watch right now.
Or it's exactly the right movie to watch right now. It's
That's a good counterpoint.
one of those things where it's like it could be either one.
Yeah, this was directed by Bernardo Bertolucci. This was from 1970. It's the first Bertolucci movie I've ever seen, which is unless you count scenes from The Dreamers. So, but there's nothing wrong with it from especially from a craft perspective. Like
Oh,
it's gorgeously shot.
gorgeous. Yeah.
You can definitely see. I was reading that like it was an influence on Francis Ford Coppola with like the Godfather films, and you can totally tell from the style.
Tell that Coppola loves Bertolucci.
Yeah, that he loves the aesthetic of this movie, and it kind of had whatever warm feeling it had. It's because it reminded me visually and just
Mhm.
sonically as the Godfather-esque. And I think the performances are all uniformly great. It's an interesting movie from the standpoint of offering a rationale for why somebody would voluntarily become a fascist, and it was to create a sense of normalcy when you're an outcast.
Exactly.
The actress playing his wife is drop dead gorgeous.
Yeah.
That's one thing. That's one thing I
Beautiful
noticed.
people in this movie. Beautiful Italian people in this
They're
movie.
beautiful Italian people.
We're not going to sit here and pretend that we're going to bring something new to the discussion of The Conformist. It is a gorgeous
Yeah.
film. It is an important film. It is a brilliant film. I'm watching it and I'm going, I've gotten so much of this movie out of pop culture osmosis. It's so in line with so many other movies I've been watching as part of this project. It's such a great mid 20th century sort of existential kind of what am I doing? Where am I? It reminded me a lot of Bresson. I've been watching more Robert Bresson movies because of the Sight and Sound list, and
Mm.
so many of those have that from a French perspective, obviously, but also have that feeling of being lost and not feeling like you belong and not feeling like society makes any sense to you and thinking about the movie in context. Obviously it's in 1970, but it's set in the 30s in Italy, where the whole purpose of the human being in society is being questioned. And so there's lots of things to talk about with the movie. There's lots of things to dissect about the movie. There's lots of things about loneliness and about um, how we assimilate or how we choose not to assimilate. But it really is. It's weird how much it is just kind of a vibes movie. Like it is just a movie that you just kind
Mm.
of watch and you sort of feel, and you're watching the performances and you're thinking about what the characters are saying. There's a plot, but it's so much more, as we've said, about the photography and more about the sense of alienation that that photography builds. There's some truly brutal stuff in this movie. There's some truly, I mean, deeply uncomfortable stuff to watch in this movie
Yeah.
as well. That feels really alienating. So, like, it's one of those things where it's just like you're watching, like, like I said, like I watched Lawrence of Arabia for the first time for this project, and I'm like, oh, it's Lawrence of fucking Arabia. Like, yes,
Yeah.
obviously, it's everything I thought it was going to be. And The Conformist is the same thing. This is exactly the movie I thought it was going to be. That is 100% a compliment, and it's really just about having the experience, internalizing it, and going, this is why this movie is so remembered.
So I got maybe I'm questioning the Sight and Sound list
Maybe.
on this one, and the reason I say is the question I had in my head a little bit was why this one, and some of it is like it's undeniable the filmmaking technique and the artistry and the craft. It's an important movie.
Mhm.
Um, but why this one in the sense that like if you're aggregating critics and Sight and Sound's filmmakers too, right?
It's directors, it's filmmakers, it's critics, it's, yeah, it's,
Yeah. What like I'm and maybe this is just kind of my averageness showing, but I wonder this movie's not populist in any way, shape, or form. So how can you wrap your arms around this, really? But I see other movies on the list, like I've never seen the movie, but I know like Shoah is like on the list, and that's like a 10-hour Holocaust documentary. And obviously a lot of it has to do with the movie's importance and cultural significance. But does the Sight and Sound list sort of almost cynically exist to elevate movies that are quote unquote important over movies that are quote unquote the most satisfying
right.
as whole experiences?
And I'd have to look to see, because one of the most interesting things about the Sight and Sound list is, of course, it's every 10 years. And
Hmm.
when you see movies come on the list and off the list, and movies that drop in rank
Yeah,
and go up and down, I'm almost positive that The Conformist has been on there for quite a while. I'm sure it's
yeah.
been on every poll since 1970, but I would be very curious to see how it's risen and fallen over the years, because I do think that, especially with the fact that Janine Dealman was number one on the list this past poll, I do think of the Sight and Sound list less as a definitive canon of 250 of the best films ever made, and more like a running commentary on itself. You know what I mean?
All right.
Like it's sort of like how we've sort of like at this last list really elevated like female filmmakers and filmmakers of color and like lots of, disenfranchised peoples like in filmmaking, and the old list still exists. So like
Yeah.
I feel like it's less about refining and shaping it every 10 years than it is just, this is where the sensibilities are now. And then, as you alluded to earlier, like the sort of anti-fascist message, the idea of most fascists just doing it for reasons that don't have a lot to do with the political ideology of fascism and more to do with
Yeah.
convenience, you know which obviously is very analogous to where we are now, where it's just like everybody's going, I'm not really a Nazi. It's like, yeah, but you kind of are if you're with the Nazis, right? I do think this is an important film. I do think it belongs on the list, frankly. I do think it's, if you're making a list of roughly 300 of the best movies ever made, I do think that this movie, Bertolucci in general, belongs on there. I do think he's part of the canon. I do think he has to be there.
Yeah,
I
it's not even, yeah, it should be more populist stuff necessarily, because I'm not saying like,
No, I know. I
you
just
know, yeah, no, no, no. I'm not correcting you. I'm just clarifying. I guess what I was trying to say is this movie's so hard to wrap your arms around that I don't understand anybody taking it to heart other than like wanting to watch it once and being like, okay, that was really powerful, and then moving on.
And I think there are movies like that. You know what I mean? There are
Yeah,
movies that are made for that purpose, and not. I mean, it's a European film. Obviously, the subject
yeah,
matter is such that it is not. It doesn't lend itself to a crowd pleasing result. I mean, Patrick, when we were doing the F This Movie Fest. Remember Patrick joking about people wanting F This Movie Fest to go into the 1970s, and Patrick joking,
yeah.
do you have you ever seen any movies in the 70s? They all end horribly. It's like every year with the Oscars where we get that thing where it's like, well, why did this movie, that nobody saw win Best Picture? Shouldn't they pick something better? And it's like, I'm not even really being dismissive or cynical of that argument. I don't think that's necessarily a bad argument. I do think there's a degree to which, you know, movies are part of pop culture and they
Yeah.
should reflect pop culture in a way. That being said, art should last longer than the pop culture mores of the moment or the moods of the moment. So it's a complicated question. I don't have an answer for you. It's just it's
No, and I don't have an answer for it either. I mean, like on one hand, I respect the that Sight and Sound is sort of staking its claim in being like this is to elevate movies that you might not otherwise watch or carry on through the generations. So I appreciate it from that standpoint, and I think that that's all the reason that it needs to exist. I just think that if you're it its burden is that you have a list of 200 plus movies or whatever because then you're saying it's like the 1001 movies you need to see before you die. It's like if somebody said this was one of the 1001 movies I need to see before I die, I would just be like, are you, and I wouldn't even mean this in like a facetious way. It's just like, are you telling me this because you really believe this, or are you telling me this because you think that you should believe this? I haven't seen three of the movies that we're going to talk about this month, so I'm glad that I'm going to get the opportunity to.
That's a great.
And the next three are lighter fares, so
Yes.
I'm very much looking forward
We,
to those
we,
two.
we decided to go alphabetically, which put the conformist first, which may have been a rough choice, but
That's fine. No, I'm actually happy that we watched it first.
Alpha.
It's
That being said, we do
yeah,
have some more positivity, I think, next week, I think, which is good.
yeah, I've seen Johnny Guitar before. I'm eager to revisit it. I'm a big Sterling Hayden fan, so
And
this
I'm a big
is
Nicholas Ray fan, so I'm
I'm a
really
big Nicholas Ray fan too. What's your favorite Nicholas Ray movie?
in a lonely place is
That's mine too.
yeah, yeah, woo,
There
yeah.
we go.
So I've never seen Johnny Guitar. I've always heard nothing but wonderful things about it. I love Nicholas Ray, so I'm really excited to watch that next week. So hopefully, not to say this was a bad result, but hopefully we get a little bit more,
Uh,
a little more
I
jocular, kind of like this is fun next time. Yeah.
I on Letterboxd I started ranking every movie that we're covering for reserved seating this year, and this I put The Conformist comfortably between here and always.
All right. You know what? That's about right. All
All
right.
right. Well, thank you everybody for watching, and thank you, Rob. This is going to be a fun month for the rest of the way, and I'm happy that I finally saw my first Bertolucci and I saw The Conformist. It's something that's very resonant, and maybe that's why it touched me in such a weird way.
Sometimes you just have to eat your movie vegetables, Adam.
My new TV will be only populist movies.
Yes. No more Bertolucci for you on the TV.
I'm feeding it a diet of junk food and comfort food. If
More
I'm gonna watch anything hardcore, it's all on my phone.
more cash out sequels only.
So until next time,
These seats are fascist, but only when convenient.
I don't want my seat to be fascist.